Imported organic food, that's another bit of greenwash. I mean, eating organic food is fabulous, but if you do true cost pricing of the flying and the fossil fuels required, it's a potential greenwash. People say eat local food first, organic local food second, imported local food third. So the first thing you should eat is anything grown local, or obviously the first thing you should eat is local organic food, and then anything grown locally, and then talk about importing. Fair trade without land ownership. That's actually a little bit premature, but we've mentioned it here. When I drink organic coffee or fair trade coffee and as much fair trade food as we can, but when your money goes down to a country where they, or from my perspective, down to a country where they produce these things that we can't grow in Canada, the question is, where does the money go? And if the people that are producing it don't own the land, they don't accumulate that kind of wealth. It all just goes into the person who owns the land. And if the land is unequally distributed and owned by a small number of people, the people working on it will stay forever poor, regardless of how much money you pay for the coffee, etc. Carbon trading, another potential greenwash. Apparently the coal industry in Australia is in favor of carbon trading. So that means it's probably a scam. So a better way, in my opinion, is we should do carbon taxes, and we should tax at source where the oil, coal, and gas comes out of the ground or into the country. You apply at source. There are far fewer points of taxation. The revenue stream to government can be used to reduce income taxes and reduce business taxes. Rent subsidies, again a little bit premature, but we'll develop this as we go on this evening. But when the government subsidizes rent, the people who do the renting never get any richer. The money immediately goes into land and up go the rents, because people have more money to pay. The owner of the land underneath the buildings, or the owner of the land, accumulates all the wealth, and the people who are renting stay forever poor. Food banks, same thing. Everyone says hunger is awful, and of course it is. We need to have food banks. We have them in Canada now. We never had them when I was a kid, but now we have them everywhere. But what you're doing is releasing money from the poor, so they don't have to buy food. Not that they had money in the first place, but that money that they would have spent on food but had no choice, they will now be able to spend more on rent. And so rents will go up because we have food banks. And who gets the money from rent? People who own the land. And the poor don't own the land. So it's again this vicious cycle that we get into. Foreign aid, same thing. We want our governments to spend 0.7% of the GDP on foreign aid, but it's unequally, when it's applied down there, it often ends up in the hands of a small number of people, not the people, because they don't own the land, and all wealth accrues to land, and if people don't own the land, then they never incur any kind of getting out of poverty. Another scam, ethanol, produced by corn or soy. We're going through that in North America big time. The governments all over Canada, the United States, George Bush wants to reduce dependence on foreign oil. So he wants to subsidize farmers to produce more corn and soy, and building these big ethanol plants. And everyone knows it's basically a net energy neutral or energy loss. However, cellulose ethanol is much improved, I suppose. Carbon offsets, again. When I flew to Australia here, I had a lot of green guilt about flying here, but I didn't buy carbon offsets, because you hear stories that it's a scam, that people would be planting trees and the trees would be planted anyway, or there's the lag time, and what are they going to do with the trees once they're planted? It's not formalized yet, so it was a bit too premature for myself to get into that thing. Anyway, those are some greenwashing things. Now I'd like to go through the whole thinking behind what some of the things I was alluding to. The definition of economics is the allocation of resources or mutual provision. Those two definitions are nice and warm and fuzzy. They sound wonderful, right? But if our economic system was allocating resources properly and facilitating mutual provision, we wouldn't have poverty and the gross injustice we have in Australia, in Canada, all over the world. So we have a problem with our economic system because it's not doing the job it's supposed to do. Let's look at the markets. I just threw those on there. Hunting and gatherers, they had family groups. Someone killed an animal or gathered something, they brought it back and they shared. Mutual provision. I guess the hunter got the best piece or something, but so it was a system they had. It was an economic system that they had worked out. City-states, same thing. How did it work out? Is there economic disparity? Certainly there was. That was the beginning of it. Feudalism, same thing. Then we got into communism with Marxism, where it was a command and control economy. The government decided how many loaves of bread were produced, who lived in what apartment, who got to buy a car. They tried to control every decision, or as many as possible, and that, as we know, did not last because it was not robust. It collapsed, it imploded under its own inertia. Then we have this thing called capitalism, which everyone, left-wing people think, oh, capitalism is terrible, but capitalism just means piles of money that are available to be invested here and there. So it's a question of who decides where you invest it and what recurs back to everyone as a result of those investments. The one thing just to say, the capitalism system, the market system, allows people in Australia, all over the world, to make billions of decisions every week, every day, because every one of us is making economic decisions all day long. When you go shopping, you make 100 economic decisions. Everything you do, coming here tonight, you made a bunch of economic decisions. Government can't possibly command and control all those decisions, and that's why the market system seems to be far better than any kind of command and control system. We have decided in our societies that we would like to have social democracy, which means a mixed economy. Governments own some things, healthcare, education, well, not healthcare in your case, it's half owned. In Canada, we have a pure system with healthcare is 100% publicly owned, publicly delivered, publicly accountable. Same with our educational system. We are more socialistic than Australia. We want governments to regulate things. We obviously accept taxation, and we want a social safety net. Production. This is where we get to the nub of the issue. The components of production, of course, are money, jobs, and resources, land, oil, trees. We live, as we all know, on a finite planet, and we face resource exhaustion, pollution, social inequity, and sprawl, which is relevant to tonight. There's the Pembina Institute in Canada. I'm not sure if they coined it, but they say we need ecological fiscal reform, EFR. And that means we should be taxing sites, sinks, and sources, the 3 S's, alliteration. And we should do that through collecting rent from sites, which means land, and pollution taxes. We live on this beautiful, fragile planet. It's the global commons. When someone uses part of the commons, they should compensate the rest of us who are not doing it. If someone abuses the commons, compensate the rest of us. And that's why we need taxes on sinks, sites, and sources.